On the far world of Valor Prime, dragons are real, massive, ancient creatures once born from science and legend. They are living weapons now, controlled by the alien nobles who rule the planet. To the nobles, dragons are symbols of power. To the humans who serve them, they are reminders of chains that will never break. Among those humans is Ethan Cole, a quiet boy from the lower districts. His hands are always rough from work, his clothes plain, his head always bowed. He works in the Royal Dragon Stables, a huge, echoing place filled with heat, smoke, and the low rumble of sleeping beasts. His job is simple: clean their pens, carry their food, and stay silent when nobles pass by. No one notices him, and that's how he survives. Humans like Ethan are treated as second-class beings. The aliens believe humans are soft, too emotional to be strong. Ethan has learned to accept it, even though deep down he dreams of a life where humans are free again. Every night, he whispers those dreams to himself before sleep, knowing no one will ever hear them. One evening, a storm rolls over the stables. The air smells of iron and ash. Ethan is finishing his chores when he notices a dragon that hasn't eaten all day, an old one with faded scales and cloudy eyes. The other workers avoid it, saying it's dangerous, unpredictable. But Ethan can't stand seeing it suffer. He walks closer, talking softly as he would to an injured horse back on Earth. "Easy now," he murmurs, setting a bowl of water down. "You're not alone." The dragon lifts its head, smoke curling from its nostrils. Its golden eyes flicker faintly, studying him. For a long moment, neither moves. Then, to Ethan's shock, the massive creature lowers its head and lets him touch its snout. The skin is warm and rough beneath his hand. The dragon releases a low, deep sound, something between a growl and a sigh. It almost sounds like a purr. When Ethan steps back, his heart is racing. He doesn't know why the dragon allowed it, but he feels something shift inside him, like the spark of a memory he's never lived. Later that night, long after the stables have gone quiet, a strange glow spreads through the dragon pens. The creatures begin to stir, their eyes shimmering faintly gold. The guards rush in, shouting orders, readying their weapons. But the dragons don't attack. They just wait. When Ethan appears, the growling stops. The dragons slowly settle, curling back into rest as if soothed by his presence. The guards stare at him in confusion. No one speaks. Ethan stands there, surrounded by silence and soft breathing. The air feels heavy, ancient, as if the world itself is holding its breath. He doesn't understand it yet, but something deep within the dragons has awakened, something that recognizes him. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Cole feels that maybe, just maybe, he isn't as powerless as everyone says. By sunrise, the story had already spread through every corridor of the palace. A human boy had made dragons obey him. At first, the nobles laughed, waving it off as a foolish rumor from the lower ranks. A stable boy commanding dragons? Impossible. But as the day went on, guards whispered, and even the royal handlers avoided the stables. There was fear in their voices, and a strange sense of awe. When Lord Kale, master of the Eyrie, heard the rumors, he refused to believe them. He was a proud man, tall and cold, known for his cruel discipline. To him, humans were only useful for work, nothing more. So when Ethan was brought before him, still covered in stable dust, Kale's voice was full of mockery. "You boy," he said, his eyes sharp like glass. "They say the dragons bow to you. Is that true?" Ethan swallowed. "I don't know, sir. I didn't do anything." The nobles standing behind Kale laughed softly. But Kale raised a hand and smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Then we'll see if that's true," he said. "Let's give you a real dragon." The test was set. In the lower arena of the Eyrie, a feral dragon waited, a massive beast with blackened scales and fire seeping from its jaws. It was known for tearing apart anyone who dared enter its pit. The nobles gathered to watch, expecting a quick and bloody end for the human boy. Ethan stood at the gate, heart pounding. He could feel the dragon's heat from across the arena. The guards whispered, some shaking their heads, pitying him. But Ethan didn't run. Something deep inside told him to stay calm. The gate opened with a loud hiss, and the dragon roared, a sound that shook the ground beneath him. Smoke poured from its mouth, and its golden eyes burned with rage. But instead of fear, Ethan felt something else. A pull. Like a quiet voice calling from within the creature. He stepped closer. "It's all right," he said softly. "I won't hurt you." The nobles shouted for him to move back, but Ethan didn't listen. The dragon's fire dimmed. It took a single step forward, then another. Ethan's voice stayed steady. "You're not my enemy," he whispered. "You've just been alone too long." And then, before the watching crowd, the impossible happened. The dragon lowered its head. Slowly, carefully, it knelt before him, wings folding in submission. Gasps filled the arena. Some nobles stumbled backward, others dropped their glasses. Lord Kale's smile vanished. Later, scientists examined Ethan. They tested his blood, scanned his body, and checked his mind for any kind of implant or hidden ability. Nothing. He was completely ordinary, just a human boy. But the dragons didn't see him that way. Wherever Ethan walked, they turned their heads to follow. When he spoke, they listened. It wasn't power they recognized, it was something older, something they had been waiting for. And for the first time in centuries, the mighty dragons of Valor Prime bowed not to nobles, not to commanders, but to a simple human stable boy. The days that followed changed everything. The nobles could no longer laugh off what they had seen. The image of a dragon bowing before a human spread through every city on Valor Prime. The alien houses who ruled over humans for centuries now lived in fear. If one boy could command dragons, then their power, their entire rule, was in danger. The High Council of Nobles called an emergency meeting inside the Crystal Hall. The room was filled with tension and sharp whispers. Lord Kale stood at the center, his voice echoing through the chamber. "This boy is not a miracle," he said. "He's a threat. If humans learn of this, they will rise again." Others agreed. Some argued that Ethan should be studied, maybe even trained. But most were too afraid. The dragons were no longer listening to their masters. They followed the human instead, quietly, willingly. That was something no one had seen in thousands of years. Historians and scientists were ordered to search the archives for answers. What they found shook the entire council. Hidden deep beneath the old records were documents, dusty and ancient, written in a forgotten Earth language. They revealed that long ago, before the fall of human civilization, dragons were created by humans. Not as weapons of war but as protectors, companions who shared a bond built on emotion and understanding. The connection was not made through commands or control, but through empathy, the ability to feel and understand. The dragons had been designed to respond to it. It wasn't power. It was heart. And Ethan, unknowingly, carried that rare resonance that matched perfectly with what the dragons were created to obey. To the nobles, that truth was terrifying. A single human boy with empathy strong enough to awaken dragons could unite them all. If that happened, every alien ruler on Valor Prime would lose their control in an instant. That night, a decision was made in secret. Ethan Cole was to be eliminated quietly before dawn. No one would know. The nobles sent a team of armed soldiers to his quarters in the lower wing of the area. Ethan, unaware, was sitting near his window, staring at the stars. He didn't know why the dragons had chosen him. He wasn't special. He just cared. But before the soldiers could even reach his door, the air began to tremble. A deep, thunderous sound rolled through the night, not from the ground but from the skies. Every dragon on Valor Prime lifted off at once. The air filled with the beating of thousands of wings. Fire lit the clouds. The soldiers stopped in fear as shadows passed over them, massive wings blotting out the moon. The dragons surrounded the capital, roaring as one. Windows shattered, alarms rang, and the nobles fled in terror. At the center of it all stood Ethan, looking up at the sky. He didn't command them. He didn't have to. The dragons had made their choice. That night, the rulers of Valor Prime learned the truth the hard way. The boy they tried to kill was the one the dragons had sworn to protect. The night the dragons rose changed everything. By morning, Ethan Cole was no longer just a stable boy, he was the most wanted human in the galaxy. The nobles branded him a rebel, a danger to order. But among the enslaved humans, his name became a whisper of hope. Ethan didn't seek power or fame. He only wanted peace, but the world had already chosen sides. With nowhere left to hide, he fled into the wastelands beyond the shining cities, a dry, endless stretch of red rock and forgotten ruins. There, scattered groups of humans came to find him. Some were farmers, others were mechanics or miners, all tired of living under alien rule. They looked at Ethan not as a leader, but as someone who gave them courage again. Above them, the dragons followed, flying like living shadows across the sun. Their wings blocked out the light, their roars echoing through the mountains. They guarded the humans as they built small camps, bringing food and warmth to those who had only known fear. For the first time in centuries, humans laughed around fires, children played freely, and no noble dared to step near them. Hope had returned, and it had wings. But the alien coalition couldn't let that hope grow. They gathered their fleets, massive ships that covered the sky with metal and light. Their leaders gave one order: erase the rebels and destroy the dragons. When the attack began, the world itself seemed to burn. the air filled with energy blasts and fire. The coalition ships fired from orbit, shaking the ground. Ethan stood on a cliff, watching as hundreds of dragons took flight, their bodies glowing with orange fire and blue plasma. They moved like a storm, one living, burning wave of fury. The dragons struck first. Fire and lightning tore through the warships, wings slicing through steel. The sky turned red, and the earth trembled beneath their cries. The humans below cheered as the impossible happened. The powerful fleets that had ruled for generations were falling to a boy and his dragons. But then, in the heart of the battle, Ethan saw something that made him step forward. He saw fear, not in his people but in the enemy. The soldiers inside those ships were terrified. They were fighting because they were ordered to, not because they wanted to. Stop! Ethan shouted, raising his hand. His voice cut through the chaos. The dragons froze midair, hovering in silence. No more, he said softly. We fight to protect, not to conquer. For a long moment nothing moved. Then the dragons backed away, wings folding as the sky cleared. The warships stopped firing. The world went silent. The nobles and generals couldn't understand it. They would have crushed their enemies without mercy. But Ethan had chosen compassion over vengeance, and that made him stronger than any army. That day a new name began to spread across the stars. Not rebel, not warrior, but the Dragonheart human. The boy who could end a war with kindness had reminded the galaxy that true power doesn't come from destruction. It comes from the courage to show mercy. Months passed since the great battle, and the world of Valor Prime had changed forever. The skies, once filled with warships and smoke, were now calm. The dragons no longer served the alien nobles. They were free, soaring where they wished. Cities that once belonged to the powerful were quiet, their banners torn down. And in the center of it all stood the boy who started it, Ethan Cole, the stable boy who made the dragons kneel. Peace had not come easily, but it had come. The alien leaders finally realized that fighting him was useless. Their own dragons refused to rise against him. Every attempt to rebuild their armies failed because the creatures that once gave them power now turned their backs. So, under a white flag, the leaders came to meet Ethan in the open plains outside the capital. The meeting was quiet. No guards, no weapons, just words carried by the wind. The nobles bowed slightly, a gesture they had never made to a human before. They offered peace, promising to end the enslavement of humans across every colony. They even offered Ethan a title, Dragon King of Valor Prime, ruler of both humans and dragons. Ethan listened silently. His eyes were calm, not proud or angry. When they finished speaking, he shook his head with a small smile. I'm not a king, he said. I was just a stable boy, and that's all I ever needed to be. The nobles were confused. They couldn't understand why someone with such power would refuse a throne. But Ethan didn't care about thrones or crowns. He had seen enough of what pride and greed could do. What mattered to him was that his people were free, and that the dragons, those ancient, majestic creatures, no longer suffered under chains. That evening, as the last of the alien ships left the planet, the skies over Valor Prime began to shimmer. Thousands of dragons rose into the air, their wings glowing gold and silver under the setting sun. They circled the planet in a slow, graceful dance, their reflections shining across the cities below. People came out of their homes to watch, humans, aliens, children, and elders alike. The sound of dragon wings filled the air like a song. For the first time in centuries there was no fear in those sounds, only peace. Ethan stood among the crowd, looking up. The wind tugged at his clothes, and for a moment he could almost hear the dragons speaking to him, not with words but with feelings. Gratitude. Respect. Love. He smiled faintly. You're free now, he whispered. That's all I ever wanted. Above him, the dragons moved together, forming shapes across the clouds, constellations that looked like hearts and wings. The people below would talk about that sight for generations. No one doubted the truth anymore. It wasn't power or bloodlines that made a hero. It was kindness, courage, and the will to do what was right. And on that day the heavens themselves bowed, not to a king or a warrior, but to a stable boy who taught the galaxy that the smallest human heart can change the stars.